Hello, good evening and welcome to Spring Global on Western Spring Television. Now the headlines. Federal government present 9 new grounds of appeal against the release of pro-Biafra agitator Nnamdi Kanu. UK judge cut short the Royal College of Nursing planned strike by a day. US President Joe Biden and South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol pledged to strengthen deterrence against North Korea. My name is Femi Olanikpeku. Now the news in detail. And we'll begin with legal matters, where the Supreme Court has granted leave to the federal government to bring 9 new grounds of appeal against the release of pro-Biafra agitator Nnamdi Kanu. A 5-member panel led by Justice John Okoro granted leave this afternoon while ruling on the motion by the council to the federal government. The Apex Court also granted leave to the federal government to include 9 new grounds as part of its amended notice of appeal dated 28 October 2022. The court subsequently fixed May 11 for the hearing of the suit.
Argue for a stay of execution, and the Court of Appeal granted that stay of execution. So the court was staying the execution of the liberty of the citizen, which the same court had already told to go free. So we filed an appeal against that order for stay of execution and also cross-appeal against their main appeal. These things have been going on since October. What would the federal government, what do they normally do? They will file documents at the Supreme Court here. They will undertake to serve us, the respondent. They will hide the document. They will not serve us. They did that in November last year. It was when we went to the court in January this year to try to facilitate the hearing of the appeal that we discovered.
In the meantime, an Osun State High Court presided over by Justice Oyebola Ojo has reserved judgment on the case of Hilton Hotel owner Rahmon Adedoyin and 6 staff over the alleged murder of a master student of Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, Timothy Adegoke. Justice Ojo reserved the judgment today after the adoption of final written addresses from the prosecution and defense counsel. Dr. Adedoyin with 6 of his staff, Magdalene Chefuna, Adeniyi Aderogba, Oluwole Lawrence, Oyetunde Kazim, Adebayo Kunle, and Adedeji Adeshola, are standing trial on 18 counts bordering on conspiracy, murder, and felony. At today's hearing, however, counsel to Dr. Adedoyin Yusuf Ali prayed the court to prohibit Femi Falana from participating in the case as prosecutor, adding that the fiat granted to him was not properly obtained. But Mr. Falana stated that he was properly introduced by the counsel from the Osun State Ministry of Justice to take over the matter as prosecutor. Justice Ojo thereafter pronounced that judgment on arguments on fiat will be delivered alongside the final judgment in the case. And away from legal matters, President Muhammadu Buhari says the fighting power of the Nigerian army had progressively increased since his administration began in 2015. President Buhari made this known at the Nigeria Army Parade of Trooping and Presentation of Colors at Eagle Square, Abuja, noting that the army is one of the strongest in Africa today. He said that the fighting power of the army was at its lowest ebb as of May 2015, but 7 years later, its fighting power has increased significantly, making it 4th in Africa. President Buhari this afternoon unveiled 28 out of the 81 national and regimental colors for the newly established and operationalized unit and retired unit colors of the Nigerian Army. Recent data from Global Firepower showed that the Egyptian Army tops the military ranking in Africa in 2023. And outside Nigeria, the Sudanese army has pounded RSF fighters with air raids in the capital Khartoum, while deadly fighting has flared in Darfur. Columns of smoke rose near the presidential palace in Khartoum and areas of the north of the capital as aircraft flew sorties. Battles continue despite a 3-day ceasefire brokered by the U.S. that took effect early on Tuesday, with aircraft patrolling the skies over the capital's northern suburbs.
Sudan's army has expressed willingness to extend a shaky ceasefire for a further 72 hours amid continuing battles with the rival paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, on the outskirts of the capital, Khartoum. The army said late on Wednesday that its leader, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, had given initial approval to a plan to extend the truce due to expire late on Thursday for another 72 hours and send an army envoy to Juba, the South Sudan capital, for talks. People in Khartoum and Omdurman are finding it difficult to find clean water, food and access to cash. Explosions and gunfire could still be heard on Wednesday, with warplanes in the air, although it was quieter than before the ceasefire and the situation was good enough for evacuations to continue. United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken and African Union Commission Chairperson Moussa Faki Mohammed have also discussed ways to work together to end the fighting in Sudan, the U.S. State Department said in a statement on Wednesday. Some of the heaviest battles on Wednesday were in Omdurman, a city on the northern edge of Khartoum, where the army was fighting RSF reinforcements from other regions of Sudan. The World Health Organization, WHO, expects many more deaths in Sudan due to outbreaks of disease and a lack of essential services amid fighting, its Director General said on Wednesday.
WHO expects there will be many more deaths due to outbreaks, lack of access to food and water, and disruptions to essential health services, including immunization. WHO estimates that 1/4 of the lives lost so far could have been saved with access to basic hemorrhage control. But paramedics, nurses, and doctors are unable to access injured civilians, and civilians are unable to access services.
Battles between Sudan's army and the Rapid Support Forces, RSF paramilitary, since mid-April has killed at least 459 people and injured more than 4,000, according to the WHO. According to Mike Ryan, head of WHO's Health Emergencies Program, the absence of clean water and vaccines, as well as other sanitation issues, represented the main risk to the Sudanese.
When lab workers are forced to leave a laboratory and untrained people enter that laboratory, there are always risks. But the risks are primarily to those individuals, first and foremost, to accidentally expose themselves to the pathogen. But right now, the vast majority of people have been infected with infectious diseases in Sudan are doing so because they're having to drink dirty water.
Several countries have evacuated their nationals since the ceasefire took hold. A boat evacuating more than 1,600 people from dozens of countries arrived in Saudi Arabia on Wednesday, and both Germany and France say all their citizens have now left the country. Some 536 British nationals have been evacuated from Sudan on 6 flights, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office said. The federal government has confirmed the commencement of evacuation of Nigerians stranded in Sudan. This was also confirmed by the chairman of the Nigerians and Diaspora Commission, Abike Dabiri Erewa. The NIDCAM boss disclosed that the students were being put on buses according to their states of origin for ease of conveyance to their states of origin. Minister of Foreign Affairs Jeffrey Onyema revealed that 40 luxury buses were made available in Sudan to pick up Nigerian nationals in the country to Egypt, where they would be airlifted back home. Minister of State Zubairu Dada noted that the Saudi Arabia government had already evacuated some Nigerians through the sea to safety, and once the situation calms down, arrangements would be made to move them back to Nigeria. It is believed there could be up to 5,000 Nigerians living in Sudan, and that 3,500 of them are students. Temi Takbe, Ajijola Oluwaola, Western Spring Television.
In the United Kingdom, a judge has court shut the forthcoming strike in England by members of the Royal College of Nursing by a day. The walkout was due to start at 20 hours local time on Sunday and was going to last until 20 hours on Tuesday. The judge ordered that the nurses' strike must now end on Monday, as the 6-month notice it issued ends on Monday. UK Health Secretary Steve Barclay, who took the RCN to the High Court, welcomed the decision, adding that the government would not stand by and let unlawful strike action go ahead. Meanwhile, the RCN General Secretary, Pat Collins, speaking outside the court, said the action of the Health Secretary has lost him the public.
Steve Barclay may get a legal win today, but what he has done is he has lost the public and he has certainly lost nursing. So it is a short-term gain, but long-term there's no trust whatsoever from any of our nursing staff now in this government, and certainly the public.
And to the Russia-Ukraine war, NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg says the alliance and its partners have provided Ukraine with 1,550 armored vehicles and 230 tanks. Mr. Stoltenberg said the alliance has trained and equipped more than 9 new Ukrainian armored brigades, adding that these will put Kyiv in a strong position to retake its occupied territory. He warned that NATO must never underestimate Russia, adding that the alliance summit in Lithuania would set out plans for a multi-year program of support for Ukraine. Mr. Stoltenberg further welcomed the call between China's President Xi Jinping and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky.
Provide Ukraine with what it needs to prevail. I thank Luxembourg for your generous contributions to NATO's Ukraine Fund. This is providing urgent support, including medical supplies, mobile satellite systems, and pontoon bridges. Overall, through the contact group led by the United States, NATO allies and partners have provided unprecedented support to Ukraine. More than 98% of the combat vehicles promised to Ukraine have already been delivered. That means over 1,550 armored vehicles, 230 tanks and other equipment, including vast amounts of ammunition. In total, we have trained and equipped more than 9 new Ukrainian armored brigades. This will put Ukraine in a strong position to continue to retake occupied territory.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has revealed that at least 1 person was killed and 23 others were wounded in a Russian missile strike in Mykolaiv today. Ukrainian officials said Russia bombarded Mykolaiv with 4-caliber missiles launched from the Black Sea today. According to them, the high-precision weapons were aimed at private houses, a historic building, and a high-rise building. Kyiv Regional Governor Vitaly Kim said emergency services put out several fires caused by the missile debris. General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces said fighting gripped Bakhmut and nearby areas after Russian troops had failed to advance on 2 villages to the northwest. Elsewhere, head of the Catholic Church and Bishop of Rome, Pope Francis, will for the first time allow women to vote at an influential global meeting of bishops in October, a move that has been welcomed as a historic first. The new rules announced yesterday will give 5 religious sisters voting rights at the Synod, which is a papal advisory body. In the past, women were only allowed to attend the gathering as observers. Men will still cast the majority of the vote at the influential gathering. Nevertheless, the reforms are seen as a significant shift for the Roman Catholic Church, which has been male-dominated for centuries. In a further break with tradition, Pope Francis announced that voting rights would also be extended to 70 hand-picked non-clerical members of the religious community, moving the synod away from being a meeting solely of the church hierarchy. The US-based Women's Ordination Conference, which advocates for women priests, has called the reform a significant crack in the stained glass ceiling. And in the Middle East, Iran has seized a Marshall Islands-flagged oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman in international waters this morning, the latest in a series of several seizures of commercial vessels in Gulf waters in the past couple of years. U.S. Navy has said the seizure of the Advantage suite by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy disrupts royal security as well as stability, and called on Tehran to immediately release the tanker. The Navy in a statement said a ship, a Suezmax oil tanker built in 2012, issued a distress call during the seizure. Iranian authorities are yet to respond to the seizure. In the meantime, the Palestinian Authority has denounced European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's congratulatory message on Israel's 75th year of independence. The PA, in a statement, called Ms. von der Leyen's message inappropriate, false, and discriminatory, adding that her remark about Israel making the desert bloom in particular was an anti-Palestinian racist trope. The PA called the speech propagandist and part of the continued erasure of the Nakba, referring to the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in 1948. Ms. von der Leyen had, in a speech dedicated to the Jewish nation's independence, lauded Israel's democracy and its ties to Europe.
Dear President Herzog, dear friends, 75 years ago, a dream was realized with Israel's Independence Day. After the greatest tragedy in human history, the Jewish people could finally build a home in the Promised Land. Today, we celebrate 75 years of vibrant democracy in the heart of the Middle East. 75 years of dynamism, ingenuity, and groundbreaking innovations. You have literally made the desert bloom, as I could see during my visit to the Negev last year. Today we also celebrate 75 years of friendship between Israel and Europe. We have more in common than geography would suggest. Our shared culture, our values.
You're watching Spring Global on Western Spring Television. We'll be right back after this break.
Ahmadu Bello, Prince Royal, was born 6th of December 1910 at Rabba Village, Sokoto, northwestern Nigeria. His father was a district head and heir apparent to the Sultanate throne from the house of Usmanu Danfodio, a religious and social reformer who brought the Habib dynasty under the Fulani Caliphate in the beginning of the 19th century. Ahmadu Bello raised the bar of political consciousness and participation when, in 1944, he engineered the establishment of the Northern People's Congress (NPC) as the first political party in northern Nigeria and the rallying point for politicians in the region before independence. History will not forget Ahmadu Bello for his charisma and political sagacity, which provided easy passage for his kinsmen to assume political and administrative positions in Nigeria's post-independence era. The distinguished elder statesman and Sardauna of Sokoto has his face on his country's 200 naira currency as a mark of honor to one of the architects of Nigeria's independence. Western Spring Television identifies Ahmadu Bello as a watershed character in history.
Welcome back. In the United States, President Joe Biden and South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol have pledged to strengthen deterrence against North Korea, including sending nuclear-armed U.S. submarines and other military assets to Seoul. Mr. Biden and Mr. Yoon made a vow in a joint news conference following their meeting in Washington, D.C. to mark the two countries' 70-year alliance. Mr. Yoon said the new deterrence agreement, dubbed the Washington Declaration, represented an unprecedented expansion and strengthening of the bilateral strategy. While answering questions on his re-election bid, President Biden defended his decision to run despite his age, stating that he has never been this optimistic of the Chants of America.
In fact, they've been treated much different than Universal.
I feel good. I feel excited about the prospects, and I think we're on the verge of really turning the corner in a way we haven't in a long time. I know you're tired of hearing me say we're at an inflection point, but we really are. What happens in the next 2, 3, 4 years is going to determine what the next 3, 4 decades look like. And I have never been more optimistic in my life about the possibilities of the United States. And the question is whether or not, look, there's more to finish the job. We have an opportunity to put ourselves in a position where we are economically and politically secure for a long time. Look, we continue to have, and now you don't like me hear me saying it, there's still a contest between autocracies and democracies. And we're the leading democracy in the world. And it's something I know a fair amount about, something I care about, and something that I have found a willingness of an awful lot of our allies and friends to follow. So I think that, we have to finish the job and nail it down.
Meanwhile, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has rushed off a lawsuit against him by Walt Disney, describing it as politically motivated and accusing the company of lacking accountability and transparency. Mr. DeSantis, speaking in Jerusalem during an international tour aimed at burnishing his foreign policy credentials before an expected presidential bid, hailed Israel as one of the most valued and trusted allies of the United States. Mr. DeSantis told reporters at a news conference that he doesn't think the suit has merit, adding that the suit has a political undertone. The lawsuit filed against him by Disney, which has accused his administration of weaponizing its power to inflict political punishment in a dispute over special provisions of the Disney World theme park in Central Florida.
In fact, they've been treated much different than Universal, SeaWorld, and all these other places. And so they're upset because they're actually having to live by the same rules as everybody else. They don't want to have to pay the same taxes as everybody else. And they want to be able to control things without proper oversight, which every other Floridian has to have this type of oversight, all Florida businesses. So it's a little bit much to be complaining about that. I don't think the suit has merit. I think it's political. I think they filed, in Tallahassee for a reason because they're trying to generate, some district court decision. But we're very confident.
And still in the U.S., federal prosecutors in the U.S. say Jack Teixeira, the airman charged with leaking secret defense information, may still have access to classified material. Prosecutors are requesting that he remains in jail while awaiting trial, as it poses a serious flight risk. Mr. Teixeira, aged 21-year-old, who worked as an IT specialist at a 102nd Intelligence Support Squadron in Massachusetts, is due to appear at a detention hearing later today. Investigators are still working to determine how Mr. Teixeira allegedly leaked more than 100 pages of classified documents that included sensitive information about U.S. allies and the war in Ukraine. In court documents filed yesterday, the prosecutors argue that Mr. Teixeira poses an ongoing risk both to the national security of the U.S. and to the community. And in other news, Argentina will start to pay for Chinese imports in yuan rather than dollars, a measure that aims to relieve the country's dwindling dollar reserves. According to government officials, in April, Buenos Aires aims to pay around $1 billion of Chinese imports in yuan instead of the dollars, and thereafter about $790 million of monthly imports will be paid in yuan. Argentina's economy minister Sergio Massa stated this during an event following a meeting with the Chinese ambassador Zhu Xiaolie, noting that the decision aims to ease the outflow of dollars. The decision comes as the South American nation battles critical levels in its dollar reserves amidst a sharp drop in agricultural exports caused by historic drought, as well as political uncertainty ahead of elections this year. And the U.S. House of Representatives yesterday narrowly passed a bill to raise the government's $31.4 trillion debt ceiling that includes sweeping spending cuts over the next decade. The bill isn't expected to pass the Senate, and President Joe Biden is expected to veto it if it did, but a mostly partisan 217 to 215 vote represents a win for Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Mr. McCarthy hopes to lure President Biden into negotiations of cutting spending, even as the White House and congressional Democrats insist on a debt limit increase with no strings attached. The U.S. Treasury Department could run out of ways to pay its bills in a matter of weeks if Congress fails to act.
The sad part here is now the Democrats need to do their job. The president can no longer ignore by not negotiating. Senator Schumer, if he thinks he's got a plan, put it on the floor. See if you can pass it, and then we can go to conference. But now, the president can no longer put this economy in jeopardy. We lifted the debt limit. We've sent it to the Senate. We've done our job, the only body in here that's done theirs.
Other some sports stories now. Newcastle boss Eddie Howe has urged England forward Anthony Gordon to shut out the noise on his first return to Everton. Gordon, aged 22, moved to Newcastle from the Toffees for £45 million in January. His departure upset some Everton fans, and he is expected to receive a heated reception at Goodison Park. Howe, speaking at his pre-game press conference, said he doesn't want it to become a big talking point in the game. He noted that even though it was important for Anthony, the most important thing is for him to come through the game in a good way. And back to Africa, Algeria had a list of 4 bids to host the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations, which the Confederation of African Football announced this afternoon. CAF, in a statement, said it has received bids from Algeria, Botswana, Egypt, and a joint candidacy from Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda for the 2027 tournament after the expiry of the deadline for declarations of interest. But Morocco was a surprise omission, suggesting a compromise over the 2025 edition has been struck. CAF has repeatedly delayed deciding who will replace Guinea, who was stripped last year of the hosting right as a 2025 host. Algeria and Morocco are the top 2 contenders for 2025, but choosing between the 2 neighbors became a political dilemma for the organizers. And before we end Spring Global, here is a recap of our top stories. The Supreme Court has granted leave to the federal government to bring 9 new grounds of appeal against the release of Paul Biafra agitator Nnamdi Kanu. And a judge has cut short a forthcoming strike in England by members of the Royal College of Nursing by a day. U.S. President Joe Biden and South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol have pledged to strengthen deterrence against North Korea. You can follow us on all of our social media handles on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. My name is Femi Olanipekun. Good evening.